Today we're going to talk about boundaries. Boundaries are used for continuous variables, and we need sometimes to measure a continuous variable. If you watch the other video about discrete and continuous variables in chapter 1, then you know continuous variables keep on going. They're infinite. So sometimes we need to measure continuous variables, so we have to sometimes calculate what's called a boundary for them. Boundaries are used when you're making graphs, when you're trying to do cutoffs for different values. An example would be your GPA. Let's say you calculate your GPA, and for the semester you got a 3.6. Well, the boundaries in Frederick County Public Schools is a 3.5 and up for an A. So that means that you would get an A for the term or for the semester or however your GPA is calculated. If you got a 3.49, you would get a B because 3.A is the boundary for an A. Anything below a 3.5 is going to be a B. So you all kind of know what boundaries are already and know them. So it's just basically a cutoff that we use for continuous variables. Boundaries are always one more decimal place than the original. So an A would be a 4, a B would be a 3. So it's always one more decimal place, and they always end in a 0.5. So to calculate boundaries, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is add a 0 to the end of the number that you're trying to calculate a boundary for, and then add and subtract a 5 at that place value. So we're going to do a couple together. So an example, 8. So we take the number 8 and we want to find the upper and lower boundary for it. So we add a 0 at the end of the number, doesn't change the value of it. And then where I'm adding that 0, wherever I add that 0, I'm going to add and subtract a 5 at that place value. So this is the tenths. So I'm going to add and subtract a 0.5 at the tenths place. So I'm going to add 8 plus 0.5, 8.5, 8 minus 0.5, 7.5. And those are your boundaries. This is going to be your lower boundary, and this is going to be your upper boundary. Later in chapter 2, if you do chapter 2, or if when you make graphs sometimes or charts, these are called limits. So this would be your lower limit and your upper limit. Okay, let's look at the next one, 132.8. So step 1, add a 0 to the end of the number, does not change the value. Then we're going to plus and minus at that place value. So that's the hundredths place. So we're going to add and subtract 0.05 because that's at the hundredths place. That's where you added the 0. That's where you add the 5. So we add 0.05, to it, so 132.85, and we subtract 132.75. Those are your boundaries. So pretty much 80 plus 5, 80 minus 5. Example 3, add a 0, plus or minus point. Now this is the thousandths place, so we're going to do 0.005. Wherever you add the 0, that's where you put the 5. So we added a 0 in the thousandths place, so we're going to add and subtract 5 thousandths, third decimal place, third decimal place over. So we add it, so that becomes 235. 230. If you want to just look at it and ignore the decimals while you're doing the work, it's 230 plus 5, and then 230 minus 5. So there we have our lower and our upper boundaries, and like I said, sometimes I've seen them called limits. Last one, add a 0 at the place value, plus, minus, 0.005, 1.845. We add 840 plus 5, and then 840 minus 5. can hear that snoring, that's my golden retriever, sorry. Okay, so that's it. Basically, just to review, you're going to take the number, add a 0 to the end. Wherever that place value is, you're going to add a 5 at that place value. So this was at the thousands, so I'm going to add and subtract a 5 thousandths. And those are boundaries.